love that the way you just the concept of cinema body, cinema mind as a way to kind of get us all more regulated because it's regulated
Sure.
around a subject that used to unite us.
Yeah.
Now it's so perplexing, right?
No, that's it. And like, there's all everybody's kind of, well, especially on Substack as well, people are kind of arguing about, not arguing, but they're sort of discussing how to get people to go to the cinema and all that kind of thing, and there's so much sort of discussion about where cinema is and whether films are popular or not, and independent filmmaking as well. There's just loads of conversations about all this stuff, which is kind of interesting, I think. So yeah.
Some of the best conversations are being held on Substack right now.
Yeah.
Thank God we have that sanctuary.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on, Gary. It's great to speak to you. I
Yes.
really, really enjoyed your pieces that I've read so far. But
Thanks.
I'm really excited to speak to you as a in your role as a sort of visual artist director. And about the Substack, which is called Before the AI Yells Cut. And I think
Yes.
one of the main things really for me that struck me was your sort of sensibility regarding AI and the culture and AI and filmmaking kind of matches mine a little bit. So thanks for coming on to start with.
I mean, I'm loving any opportunity to regulate directly, openly, and in a deep way around the issues surrounding our visual culture today. Because if you go on Twitter or X or Instagram, everything is being forced to be cut down into 6-second bite-sized pieces. But we need much longer conversations to properly get below the surface of all the buzzwords that are getting thrown at us. So thank you for having me. Yes, I'm
No,
looking
it's
forward
great.
to this chat.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
It'll be fun.
So obviously we're going to talk about your big upcoming exhibition, which looks really
Yeah.
exciting. But your sort of career and relationship to filmmaking and cinema as experience is really fascinating to me as well, because you've got kind of a very varied career and journey. Um, but maybe you could take us back a little bit to, some of your formative experiences, whether they're personal or artistic, and when did you first feel drawn to cinema as an expressive language you were interested in?
Okay, let me see. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to not do what Jennifer Coolidge did in The White Lotus and stuff all the way from the beginning. You know, when CNI, and they were like, oh, we're going all the way from the start. I was born in San
Yeah,
Francisco. No.
yeah.
Well, I've been as an artist from the global south that's trying to kind of navigate my place in visual culture today when a lot of the playing field is being leveled because of AI. Um, it's an interesting time and a place just to kind of position myself because I feel in between worlds, obviously, but also now in between formats. Yeah, I went to film school, Canada, the US. I dropped out of grad school to shoot a project in Thailand for the late His Royal Majesty the King Bhumibol uh, Adyut Adyutesh, the previous king, the longest reigning monarch. They were having a program to celebrate him,
Right.
and I couldn't pass up that opportunity. That brought me back to Southeast Asia, and after that, I sort of never went back to formal studies to continue
Okay.
my grad program, and kind of went into the field,
Right.
which is really where I belonged. And after a while, I kind of developed a commercial career based mainly in the Chinese market in Shanghai
Sure.
for about seven years pre-pandemic. At that time, uh, looking back at it now, considering how all of that has been upended by AI, that was really like one of the last periods to really test and experiment with live action filmmaking tools and concepts, build sets, do all those things before the moment we're at, which is, I'm transitioning, in the middle of transitioning to long format filmmaking and understanding what it would be to develop original IP in story ecosystem of the future. So AI has been a real opportunity because it's allowed me to kind of develop a lot of proof of concepts quickly But at the same time, as somebody that didn't quite grow up in the content age, like I maybe one of the last generations to work with celluloid in film school.
Oh, right. Okay.
And yeah, and I feel like when you emerge from film school with that kind of training, you end up watching a lot of content creators. You can't do both. You know, you can either kind of do content and all of build an audience and do all of those, have all of those rewards, or you're saving up for some grand vision, some kind of a magnum opus you're studying, and I guess I picked the latter. So here I am now,
Yeah.
come full cycle, and the vertigo that our generation experienced in switching to the content age, I think Generation Z gets now with the
Mm.
onset of AI.
Sure.
Now they've mastered the content game, you know, everything is getting turned around again.
Yeah. When you were in film school, because obviously those were Western film schools you were in, were you um, sort of entering that situation with what you might call a sort of canonical uh, love or sort of sensibility in the kinds of films you liked and the kinds of directors you liked? Were you sort of trained in that classical sense, and then obviously when you get out into the world of work, things seemed very different? Because it seems to me that's quite a quite a common experience where film university or film school has a very specific sensibility about what it teaches, and then when you get out, you're not really doing much of what you were doing at university, kind of thing.
Well, you know, the thing that I learned, that I took away from grad school was really just the relationship between form and content.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and I think that that's something that we don't really have an opportunity to address outside of an academic environment, right? Like, I
yeah.
would sum that up in a nutshell. It's just to understand that there's something called the form. Oftentimes, it's made invisible in mainstream media,
Sure.
you know, because the powers that be have all these embedded, propaganda or uses for it. But even in commercial filmmaking, I think I had a kind of different take on how can I try to use this client paid moment of filmmaking to embed some of my politics, my social politics in the commercial messaging. I had a few great opportunities in China. I think maybe one of the more notable ones was I did a branded film for the first lesbian dating app hatched in mainland China, and at
Okay.
that time it was during the onslaught of live streaming before the CCP government could catch up to the regulatory frameworks around it. So it was just everybody was live streaming, and this app was one of the first in the dating marketplace to make use of it. And so I did a branded film. It for a commercial. It received critical commentary from Li Yinhe, who is uh, a leading social advocate and pioneer of gender studies, women's studies in mainland China,
Mm.
sociology scholar, and it got banned by the CPP government. It's got resurrected on YouTube later. I think it's still at close to 6 million views. So that kind of summarizes like some of it's a hallmark piece from that era of commercial filmmaking.
Right.
Just really trying to create something that's bolder, even in what's supposedly one of the most restrictive media environments in the world,
Right.
playing inside of that sandbox and getting paid for it.
Yeah.
Trying to navigate all of the politics between the agencies and the clients and whatnot. And
Yeah.
still trying to develop a
Yeah.
voice and a vision. Yeah.
I bet that's another level from kind of like, the stereotype of the Hollywood meddling studio executive.
Yeah. So I've discovered like Seth Rogen's The Studio. And that's been
Yep.
like such a great parable for like understanding how to relate to like personify the studio system
Sure.
so that we can see how they're making decisions and why they're choosing the way, making the choices that they're making, and then how to position ourselves or relate to it. And uh, episode 2 was really it's terrific for me, the one with Greta Lee, because it's like the first time that we've seen her in
Right.
something brought like widely released since past lives, and just the way that she was like her celebrity image was solidified in the episode. I thought was very strategic and Asian about her, and I'm like all here for that. The way that she that was past lives was 2024, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
That's such a good film.
that's right. Such a good film. She's, getting all that, critical attention, and then now we see her playing herself inside of an environment where she is, like, limited she's a limited resource because they're losing her tomorrow, right? Because she's flying out to,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
meet Christopher Nolan, right? So they gotta get this shot, this magic hour, the losing light. It's a single take. And I just thought just talking about kind of the sensory aspects, the sensory quality of filmmaking,
Yeah,
that's so sensorial
yeah,
because you're getting a chance to relate to her, cinematographic identity,
yeah,
but also kind of see what she's been up to. Obviously, it's fiction, she's playing a version of herself, but still, um
yeah. No, absolutely. Um, so I was wondering kind of, you know, you're moving across the different aspects of filmmaking in terms of visual art and writing and direction. Um, and I'm just wondering, do you have one of those that feels most at home to you that sort of drives your artistic practice, or is it kind of hybridity itself that sort of underpins the work that you do?
So I've always had a struggle with, kind of pigeonholing or niching down. And, I feel that kinda I couldn't really understand how that was gonna work until the AI moment. I mean,
Mm.
because now it's beginning to be clear to me that a plurality, is going to be, a really important resource moving forward into the future when disciplines and formats begin collapsing.
Right.
And, we're much more focused on what previously were intangibles, difficult to define, like voice and vision or visual language. What's the
Sure.
visual tongue of a filmmaker or creator? And uh, I feel like the best I know how to navigate through this moment is to try to express my visual those three things, my voice, vision, and visual language, in a variety of formats in order to illustrate that they transcend the format and,
Yeah.
and the parameters of the market or how something's going to be sold or marketed. Because I feel like if you're working, if you're trying to identify what like um, high level creative looks like in order to invest in that, in order to build high trust culture between the creator and their audience, right? To build that audience up. Then it seems like once you clarify what that voice is about and there's a consistency that illustrates itself across a diversity of mediums,
Mm.
it whatever you want to output it, whatever format, whether it's a video game or viral content for YouTube Shorts when you're marketing, world building IP, however you want to work in the streamer platforms of the future. Now the Netflix is also going into video games and podcasting and trying to be more of a YouTube. Like that's all a toss up. We've got no idea how that's
Yeah.
going to pan out. And all those screenwriting rule books of, whether which page the 10 post should be, all of that is,
Yeah.
you know, going out the window a little bit, isn't
It
it?
is. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the interesting sort of dynamics, I think, on Substack as well, because, you know, that there are people who are writing on there who are very keen that it stays as a writer's medium. And I can understand that because if you're doing video and then you're doing, you know, you're doing short form, it becomes kind of like an argument about, is this just another Instagram? Is it going to go the same way as all the other platforms are going? But on the other hand, like you, in a different way, really. But I like doing podcasts. I like doing this visual stuff as well. I like writing, and I think that being able to kind of cultivate your ideas across different platforms is definitely what the future is going to look like for creators, which is really kind of interesting if you go back, say, I don't know, historically to the French New Wave, who were all critics first, and then they became filmmakers, and then painters, and they all want to express themselves in different ways. It seems like that has been negated for so long.
Yeah, I feel like so much of that has been like trying to force us into container formats in order to manage
Yeah,
uh, the scope of creative vision. And the reality is that the world that we're dealing with now is increasingly nuanced and complex. Like to grow up into this, all of the conversations are so reductive, and that's why it's so divisive. That's why everything's extreme, and
mm,
we're forced to pick one or the other. So what happens when you are somewhere in between, or you've got a caveat to whatever your belief system is? Well, you need a much longer conversation in order to iron those kinks out.
yeah,
And we can't just reduce everything to a hook, a 5-second hook that's going to work on social media. Um, so I think just the content age necessitating that we all learn to market ourselves in smaller and smaller bite-sized pieces is a detriment to the natural trajectory of building vision. Like, what is vision? Like, what's so difficult for us to define? Like, what is an auteur, and whether is a authorship really going to go away? Or another way to talk about it maybe would be like authorship represents ownership, right? And in a time when you can just prompt any visual style or aesthetic without having any investment in it, you can just borrow freely. uh, Authorship to me represents like in order to be an author or to be willing to go down that path, you have to be prepared to not be liked.
mm,
And so much of the content age is about being appealing, being
mm,
liked,
yeah,
being liked by a wide variety of invisible people that you never get to meet
sure,
or have deep conversations with in real life.
yeah,
So those are anti-ethical forces.
yeah,
And but vision is, to me, the one of the last strongholds of creative capacity
mm,
as we forge through this murky future. And like you're scrolling through X and you're seeing things like maxed out GPU clusters. You know, uh, these are things that are being advertised as creative capacities, like when
yeah,
they're advertising generative AI tools. These are buzzwords that are being used to market creativity to us now, like creative capacity,
yeah,
creative engines to us. Uh, Phrases like AI, let AI be your director, or this AI is going to give you control, directorial control like you've never had. The oxymoron,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the inherent
yeah,
contradiction in that
sure,
sentence. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like we're not unpacking any of that.
Yeah. No, no, it's that's really true. I mean, I definitely want to get to the sort of AI question. Just before we move on to, because I do want to talk about your expo, of course, coming up in Osaka. But just on the audience thing, one of the things I've read a couple of people recently who've talked quite a lot about. We talk about audiences online, and that a lot of writing, a lot of research has gone into the kind of nicheification, let's say. But I was listening to some interesting stuff about how there are sort of there are sort of two broad audiences. One is short form and one is long form, and it's almost as if they're completely different groups entirely. It's like if you make
Yeah.
something and you make it, and it's the same content, but essentially you make it long form, an entire section will just not engage with that. But if you make the same content, you make it short form, that other side of the audience will engage with that. And it's really interesting to me how that sort of sense of the notion of a kind of mass audience, a mass collective sensibility about how we watch, that's kind of
Mm.
over now. It's really interesting how that's the case. And like one of the sort of contradictory things, or one of the things that, I mean, you mentioned Netflix there, was I was reading this piece
Yes.
about this piece in the New York Times where they were talking about they make content now that's supposed to be on the background while you focus on your phone, which is kind of
Yeah. Right.
flipped from 10 years ago, where the focus was the thing and the phone would be on the background, which kind of is in bonkers to me when you think about the amount of production values that go into a 13 episode series.
Yeah, and I think it's like, okay, content, there's a hierarchy to visual culture that we don't like to admit exists. It's the same way that we want to democratize everything in life. It's a Western-centric approach. Um, uh, Many things about that is true. It works. It's part of a lot of our base value systems. It informs our sense of being in, having universal access to voice and expression. I think all those things are true. But I think there's a bit of a confusion between a democratization of to the tools and a democratization to the result, the creative result. That I think we still we still want to have some form, like status isn't going to go away, and for status to for things to have status, not everybody can be at the top, and that's not to say that you intentionally keeping people out. That's not to say that you're gatekeeping, but now what we're kind of seeing is like there's all this desire to arrive without effort, like it's an arrival without effort. And I think that that changes the nature of how you arrive. Like that's not really what we wanted to do. Like we wanted to content was a way to kind of disseminate visual culture, how-to videos, tutorials, reveal, all to demystify, so that everything that was previously very limited and uh, to certain kind of access, now everybody has equal access. But it doesn't mean that certain more difficult things to accomplish, such as life experience, developing a point of view, having a broad spectrum understanding of different subject matters, so that if you're making a film, for example, you can speak and draw from different like wells of perspective and knowledge to enrich in your material. Like those are all things that you can't really just squeeze into a niche YouTube channel, because that would mess with your algorithm. That would mess with like what is my page about, what my brand is about. So all of those trappings of the content age and um that are now being extended into the streamers, like I think that they're not being interrogated enough. Like if Netflix that has come to represent the pedigree. It's like legacy media, right? It's like they need to stand for a certain amount of like prudence, or like, for lack of a better term, like they need to be uppity in order for us to have values. Like if if we live in a world where there's no sense of aloofness, not because I'm better than you, but because there is a destination, and necessarily that means that we've not all arrived.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if we all, then where's the journey? Like we all need something to aspire to.
Mhm.
So I think all those things are getting discombobulated. Everything is just being thrown into very simplistic conversations. Creative democratization is like the buzzword that keeps getting thrown out there. Yes, it's really great to see everyone be able to make their tell their own stories, and our storytelling culture has diversified. But in the same way that when we moved from film to HD video, I don't know, like 15, 17 years ago, and that was sold to us as like the end of Hollywood. Right now, everybody can make their own movies, but that wasn't really the case either.
No.
Like there are still ways that independent filmmakers had to go through certain processes of fundraising and yeah, just development, that you kind of want the process of development, because it allows you to get more feedback and for your material to mature before it's ready to be filmed. And if you don't even need production support anymore because you can do it completely with AI, then it's like you have no process, literally. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big contradictions, isn't it, with AI? It seems to me that people take it as a shortcut method rather than a in deepening method for what you can do, which is
yeah,
which is why so much of the stuff that we see that is AI made is pretty generic, and you've written about that on your Substack
yeah.
for sure. But tell us a little bit about the upcoming um expo in
Ah,
Osaka. It looks really amazing. So
yeah.
what's the sort of foundation for this?
So it's a large scale projection mapping exercise that's being organized by the Projection Mapping Association of Japan directly as an initiative directly under the Japan World Expo organizers, and it's done in relation to one of the buildings, one of the pavilions, the Expo Hall Pavilion. These wonderful pieces of architecture, and it's part of a global call for videos to be projected on the side of the Shining Hat building, the Expo Hall Shining Hat building nightly throughout the 6 months of the World Expo. And the pieces are up to 60 seconds long. So they're a way for the general public to be exposed. I think this time around, what's exciting is that this will be the first time that generative AI, fully generate AI generated creativity is being exhibited to a wide a wide public in the history of the world's fairs. So it's an interesting inflection point in visual culture for even though we've seen a lot of generative AI in the mediated format of a phone,
Right.
and these individual interactions between someone swiping through a feed, now we're going to have an opportunity to have to inhabit commons, to
Mm.
inhabit a communal space where a broad spectrum of audiences, old, young, different languages, different cultures, have a chance to be in an outdoor cinema of sorts,
Right.
and to see how that works against the backdrop of the World Expo and the legacy of the World Expo as a place that's brought people together for intentional um, communion, and to bring technology into a safe space where we don't have to talk about a product or how we're going to sell it. It's not connected to any of those things. It's just a wonder of technology. Like, look at what we can do now.
Sure.
This is where we're at. This is where the conversation is at. So please, let's move beyond the petty bullshit, okay?
Yeah.
Because we're much better than we're much better than what we're spending our time is being focused on. And my piece is going to be playing every night, nightly, after sunset, between May 13 and June 13. For a month, about 60 exposures in all. And so I'm really looking forward to, uh, the interaction with the audience, and, maybe hopefully people find me online and engaging with me, access the audience that otherwise I wouldn't have a chance to interact with. And diorama is the name of my piece. Well, it's a very visual piece because it has to appeal to without without dialogue or anything like that. Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
Collapse of a culture and moving to a new age. Yeah, those are the themes.
And as this kind of as this piece sort of a next stepping stone, or as come out of the previous pieces that I've seen online on your website, which you shared with me, which we can talk about in a second. Is it kind of that ilk where you're playing with the parameters and also maybe even the limitations of what AI can do in visual terms, you know?
Yeah, the piece that you're talking about with regards to the IP,
Mm.
the was it the IP side, artifact
Yeah,
of the future?
yeah, because I was
That one?
watching I was watching your previous pieces, the encounter with Jin Yang and 3.5 seconds.
Ah, yeah,
So great.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So I start experimenting with generative AI with um when they had with video to video, and at that time I was just mixing with live action,
Right.
just to kind of see what I could do with it, just to get a sense of uh the way, because my take on generative AI is just that, well, we're so focused on the tech right now,
Mhm.
but the whole point of AI is that the tech's going to get simpler to the point where it's literally you don't even have to press a button, and there will be a button connecting the blood, the brain, uh, computer barrier. and you
Right.
just think something, and then it will create the visual. So it seems to me like all of the experimentation with the tools to create short format, highly visual outputs, um, uh, uh, like seem to be missing the point a little bit. Like to me, it feels like if the tools are going to get better and better and exponentially better, then it seems like we should be focusing on something else that's not technological in nature, like maybe philosophy, history, the things that's going to give us the rich material to draw on or to prompt from or to reference once we have access to everything. Right? Everything is possible at your fingertips, and yet we keep creating derivatives, like depictions of the future.
Mhm.
And so I observed the space for quite a while before really getting a sense of like, well, if I can do anything, then what is it that I really want to do? And so I started about 1 year ago with a proof of concept, 3.5 seconds, which is a window into a world building project, artifacts of the future. And in that world building, I'm basically imagining that following the logical progression of the attention economy where we're at, and uh, the way the AI systems and machines are getting better and better, and being able to create more personalized content faster, that are highly attuned to all of our um, uh, bio- biological trappings, like as human beings, like the things that we're drawn to naturally. It seems like there become less and less of a point for traditional creators to suffer through the traditional process of creating, like all of
Mhm.
the, the artist suffering archetype. Like, will that go away?
Mm.
What will be the point to create organically when the machines can do it faster, more effectively, and better? So, so I think content will become that, right? Like
Mm.
there will be less of a need for organic creation when it comes to content. So that led me to the question. Well, then, what would creators like if creativity itself was personified? And it had to evolve as an organism in this world, this environment. What might it look like? What grotesque arms or like weird forms might it take? The
Mm.
human creativity itself was, there's a life force to human creativity that wants to persist, that wants to evolve. What would it look like? And it seems to me like that it would get into a place that right now has been relegated into the woo woo, but which artists naturally have an affinity to in our process. We naturally invite these processes because um, maybe we were forced to turn to some other forms of guidance,
Mm.
be it religious or spiritual or whatever modalities allow you to access those non-tangible support systems. Um, Inspiration itself maybe is will be part of what we hold on to that becomes difficult for machine learning to reproduce, through like brute computing alone. and
Right.
and and the artifacts are the objects that these creators, I imagine, would make, which would be artifacts that combine AI and technology but with transcendental wisdom, drawing from ancient wisdom traditions of the past and things like that, marginal wisdom.
Sure. Wow, there's a lot to think about there.
But it's,
I
yeah, I know
I
it's a big, very impact.